Corey, how you doing today?
I'm good. That was a much more Iowa business-like performance in Kinnick this past Saturday than we've seen really in any game this year, including the couple of games against, not inferior opponents in Troy and Illinois State. This was the most complete performance. Kirk talked about that today at his press conference. So reasons to be optimistic in Hawkeyeville.
Yeah, in no way, I don't think Corey would agree with me. Are we going to sell Washington as some great football team? But they're a capable team. They beat Michigan the previous week by 10 points. They have played everyone at least tough on their schedule up until the second half of Iowa. They should have won the game at Rutgers. They missed 3 field goals. They had a goal line stand stop them from defeating Washington State, or they could have been an undefeated football team going into this game. And I really think that, to me, this was the game of my noon window Eastern time on Saturday. So I was locked into this game until it was 30-10. And because of Iowa's defense, I tend to close out games for Iowa sooner than I do almost everybody else in the country to say, yeah, this is over. Like, I think Washington had another drive at 23-10. And I have my notes here somewhere. I take all sorts of notes, but I forget. It's already Tuesday, and it's like, okay, that game seems like it was 3 months ago at this point. But there was, whether it was a fourth down stop or a turnover, that might have been at the point that Jamari Harris had the pick down around the 10 or 15 yard line after Washington had like a 55 or 60 yard drive, that I thought, okay, that's it. And so at 30-10, I checked out, but I saw the meaningful snaps, and I thought it was a really good football game. I thought it was an intriguing game up until Iowa pulled away, of very differing styles. Cade McNamara, I think, threw it 14 times, and Will Rogers threw it, I don't even know what the number was,
Probably
50
40,
times.
40s, right? Somewhere in the
Yeah, in the
40s.
40s somewhere. And I thought it was a very interesting game. And then Iowa started to impose their will on both sides of the ball, and were clearly the better team and the more sturdy team, the more physically dominant team, and the deeper team.
I said before the game in my preview, I said if Iowa wins this game against Washington, because Washington was hot. I mean, that double-digit win against Michigan, they should have beat Rutgers. The stats say they won both of those games, right?
Yeah.
And they only really won one. So, to your point, on paper, this is a pretty darn good offense they were facing. And Will Rogers, frankly, I think he's one of the better quarterbacks in this league. Now, I know you said he may not be some. I listened to your real wrap up on the game afterwards, and you made a comment about how he's probably not a real high NFL draft prospect, but he's probably going to be drafted. I think he's one of the better all around quarterbacks in this league. Certainly, he's one of the more decorated quarterbacks. He's probably as decorated, well, not as decorated, but he's probably behind Dylan Gabriel. Who else would be in front of him as far as accolades and
Yeah. He is going to finish his career as like a top 20 or 25 quarterback in the history of the game in terms of yardage and touchdowns.
So I was impressed with him first quarter.
Yeah, I was
Had a
too.
had a couple of really interesting drives, long drives. Reminded me of some of those, like the 2017 Iowa Penn State game in Kinnick, when that was a really good Penn State offense, but they channeled the bend, don't break, and almost pulled that game off. You stop one more play, the ball goes just an inch above Amani Hooker's outstretched hand. Juwan Johnson catches the touchdown, and the game's over. But that's the perfect example of how Iowa wins games, oftentimes against really good offenses. They just are determined to keep everything in front of them, and they kind of bank on, hey, we'll capitalize at some point. And hey, they did it with that one long drive there in the first quarter that ended with the blocked field goal of Y.A. Black. It's a perfect example because typically those types of drives, I believe it was about a 7.5 minute drive. You would expect a drive like that to almost exhaust the defense and put them back on their heels and wear them out. But then they missed the field goal, and I kind of felt the opposite. I'm like, man, that's got to be so deflating for that offense. Like, they worked so hard, and yeah, they moved the ball, but it took a lot of plays to get down there, and they got zero to show for it. So I thought that was really establishing that early was huge to come away with nothing. And even if they'd come away with 3, it would just totally different than come away with 0. They had another one that was a longer drive. Will Rogers, again, I thought he was composed most of the game. Really, the difference came down to, for the first time this season, with the exception maybe being that game against the FCS opener against Illinois State, Iowa's front four got pressure consistently on Will Rogers in that Washington backfield. I know they were down at least one of their starting linemen. I think that certainly affected them. I think that's fair to say. But Iowa doesn't ever send a whole lot of extra pressure. But Aaron Graves had a great day. You have Max Llewellyn, who had a great day coming off the bench. You have Ethan Herkett, who showed out. Right now, that front four is starting to play really well. Now, we'll see how much it carries over against Michigan State. I think that's a very vulnerable Michigan State offense. I think the offense is bad. Bad. I think that offense is bad, Mark. I'll say that 3 times for emphasis. I think it's a bad offense that they're facing on Saturday, and so they got a chance to ride that momentum heading into this coming night game. I know East Lansing is traditionally a difficult place to play, but I made the prediction heading into the game that if Iowa beat Washington, they would win out, and I stand by that. I think they win out. I think Saturday was an indicator that they have, we'll have to see it in more than one game, but given the history of Iowa and how they typically develop as the season goes on, I think Saturday was their first complete game. And in certain ways, I'm guessing they kind of smoothed out some wrinkles, some demons that they haven't figured out how to address to this point. And so I expect them to carry that on into the rest of this schedule. Not that there aren't losable games, but I think we're going to see a lot of like what we saw in 2020 with how Iowa won a lot of those games, rattling off 6 straight to close the season.
So, Corey, the way you stated emphatically that Iowa is playing some bad competition, it reminds me of something I saw posted on one of your videos. We'll get to that in just a second. I'd like to see you respond to this. So, Llewellyn, it's a name that I know from our discussions and from knowing Iowa personnel fairly well, but I didn't know much about him or his impact or what level of player he is. Obviously, good enough to start for a fairly top flight defensive line, but is he becoming a more impact player? Is this indicative of who he is?
Well, technically, he's not even a starter. I mean, he's still playing behind Ethan Herkett, but we talk about this every year. Kelvin Bell and Phil Parker, those guys, they want to at least have 5 or 6 guys, preferably 7 to 8. And, I think they've settled in with, what would that be, 7? I think if I'm doing the math correctly. And Llewellyn's one of those guys. He's got a nasty little spin move off the edge. Maybe the best spin move for a guy at that position that I've seen ever at Iowa. But that, it's one thing. He's a little undersized. I think, he fits the Nate Meyer, Joe Evans, Parker Hesse. I don't want to say anything about Parker Hesse. That dude is amazing. He's playing tight end in the NFL now, but he fits more of that mold than the Drew Ott or even Deontay Craig mold. So, he's been good. He and Ethan Herkett, they just got high motors. And I just thought they made Washington's offensive line just look really bad without sending any extra people, sort of like how Ohio State made Iowa's offensive line look at times a week prior. And Will Rogers is somewhat mobile. They do bring in their backup, is it Demond Williams, that is a better athlete, and he ended up playing in some mop-up duty toward the tail end of the game. But they do bring him in on certain packages, certain downs and distances. But the only thing that I would say take away from Saturday as a negative really was I thought Deshaun Lee got exposed a little bit. We saw him struggle against Ibuka and against Jeremiah Williams a week prior, but that didn't surprise anybody because those guys are great. And I thought, what's his face for Washington? You're going to be able to tell me the kid's name. Caught the back shoulder fade in the corner. It was a beautiful throw, by the way, from Will Rogers. I want to say Potter, but it's not Potter. What's the kid's name?
I want to say Detront Watson.
No, it's not. I'll be able to tell her. Somebody will throw it up in the chat before I get to it. But
I know his name.
Really good. He's a really good receiver. I mean, Washington's. I give Jed Fish a lot of credit. He takes over a program that lost a lot, and yeah, they were in the national championship game last year, but he's got some players still. He's got some good skill position players, especially. We're talking about, not to mention
Denzel Boston.
Boston. See, I said Potter.
Yes. What I
Boston.
say, Watson. You went Potter, I went Watson. Boston.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That dude's got some skill, and Jonah Coleman's got some skill.
Oh,
But they
yeah.
kind of had to abandon the run. I mean, he finished with 9 carries, but it doesn't help when you give Iowa short fields. You have the strip sack from Aaron Graves. It was recovered by, was it Llewellyn or Herkett? I think it was Llewellyn. And then you have the 35-yard return from Weegan. So the blocked field goal was big. But then, as I said to Don Patterson Sunday night, to me, that was the series of events. Even though they came away with 3 after the strip sack, they didn't move the ball at all.
Yeah.
They got 3. They did get 3. But then the very next time they get a stop, Weegan takes it back 35 yards, and then they scored. And I think that was all she wrote. I just think that's just Iowa just exerting its will with field position.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's over. If you give Iowa short fields with this running attack, they won games with short fields with no rushing attack and no passing game. And I thought the passing game looked okay Saturday. I was not all that impressed with Cade's play. I don't think he played one of his better games, but it was really nice to see Seth Anderson make a nice play. Had a couple of drops, but it was really his first real game back. Dayton Howard gets his first career target, reception, and subsequent touchdown, and a really nice call from Tim Lester and a nice pass from Cade McNamara. Even though Addison Ostrengo was out, we saw some nice work from Luke Lachey. Johnny Pascuzzi came in, played really well. That dude is, he's a luxury to have as a walk-on tight end who would enter the portal in the offseason, comes back. So they got some good contributions from a variety of guys. Bo Stevens was out, got hurt during the game. But, hey, they got Tyler Ellsbury. There's the depth that they've developed up front. So just a lot of good things. And, hey, Isaac brings it up. Xavier Wampa had a great game. Don called it maybe his best performance of his career. I think he ended up with 10 tackles. And this is a guy who actually just ran into him at Ponchero's. I saw him getting into his car at Ponchero's the other day in Iowa City. But he's a guy who, by all accounts, was on the verge of losing his job. And he's still splitting time with Cohen and Tringer, who made a couple of nice plays. They just got 2 really good guys there. And so it looks right now like that they're pushing each other. And it was good to see Xavier. It could be easy for a guy who was a 5-star recruit heading into college. You kind of lose your job. You're losing time. You might feel a little embarrassed. You got a couple of guys that have dipped out, and Caleb Brown and LeSean Williams. You could begin to check out yourself and say, I'm just going to transfer when I get to the end of the year. And from what we saw Saturday, that's not how Xavier Wampa's approached this. And he even made a couple of nice plays on special teams. So that's a positive sign. And I would expect nothing else specifically for that DB room led by Phil Parker.
Caleb Johnson caught one of those touchdown passes from Cade McNamara. And my observation, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not an expert on the Iowa offense, nor Tim Lester's impact on the Iowa offense, but it seemed to me as though this is a simple example of taking arguably your best player on that side of the ball and putting him somewhere different that maybe the defense can't find him, don't know where he's going to be, and he lined up kind of on the left side of the formation. They just kind of leaked him out. Nobody picked him up. Nobody saw him. It's an easy touchdown.
Yeah, and Tim has done a real nice job with misdirection. I thought Saturday just the pre-snap motion was maybe as effective as it's been. And not to tell everybody I told you so, but even though the passing game wasn't like they're never going to be putting up hundreds of yards passing each week. But I said from back in August, I said I would guess that the offense, specifically the passing game, is really going to come alive once we hit October to an Iowa extent, right? To an Iowa level of what's reasonable for the makeup of this team. And they took their lumps against Ohio State, but put 40 on the board against Washington. And I thought they took really nice step in the right direction. I think they got a chance to go up to East Lansing this weekend and whoop some Green Gang butt. I mean, I just do. Or Green Green butt. I think they do. I don't think well, you want to get to that comment, don't you? I can tell.
Well, I want to get to the comment, but I think you're hitting on something that we as sports fans are apt to do, me included, is stereotyping a team, a program based on what's happened in the past and not recognizing changes. And is Iowa going to be prolific on offense? No, you've already stated that a few different ways. But do we easily make that connection to previous seasons, thinking, okay, it's always going to be a slugfest. It's always going to be 16-13. They're always just going to have to rely on the special teams and the defense, and hopefully the offense won't get in the way. Just because we haven't seen this outburst of offense, other than the running game being much better than it has been since you could fill in the blank. Uh, they are a different offense. They are a much more efficient and somewhat explosive offense than they've been. This offense from previous years is not scoring 40 points. And of course, it was field position and the defense and the special teams set up much of
Doesn't
it.
matter. They were doing that during all the
Yeah.
Bryan years
Yeah.
too. The defense was giving them short fields, and they were
Yeah.
squandering them
They're not
consistently.
scoring 40 points against a mid-tier Big Ten team. They weren't scoring 40 points against group of five teams much of the time.
Yeah, somebody
So,
said,
yeah.
somebody post game said, "When's the last time they scored 40 points, Corey?" I said, 5 weeks ago. I mean, no, it was Illinois State, but they did score 40 against Illinois. So it was 40-0.
And actually, a 40-point game in the Big Ten seems like it was eons ago. They did that against Northwestern maybe 2 years ago,
I thought they
3
scored
years ago.
30. I thought they scored 38 against Northwestern. Now I could be wrong.
That was 40-10.
Oh, 40-10. That was, you're thinking of 2015.
Oh, no, 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 no. I'm not going that far back. No, since we've done shows like 21 or 22, 40-10.
Okay.
Didn't they
I'm
beat
gonna look it
Northwestern
up
one of
right
those
now,
years?
and we're gonna be able to find out
I
what you're
know they
talking
had the
about.
game where Petrus was hurt and they barely won, like 13-10, but I thought they won a game like 40-10 against Northwestern.
We're testing your football knowledge with my Iowa football knowledge.
And of course, the Maryland game, 52-17. Of course, that was
No, look,
2021, correct?
33-13, the 40-10 game,
Okay.
2015.
All right.
So
My bad. I was thinking 33-13 then.
I'm taking the win this time, Mark.
You
So
are.
what did George's boss tell him? That's why I'm here and you're there, because I'm a winner.
Yes, I should not try to match up with the Iowa football expert.
Yeah. No,
I've learned
you're
my
right though.
lesson.
That they scored 33 a couple of years ago against Northwestern when that offense was as bad as it's ever been. I mean, 2022, middle of 22 was horrific.
I don't know why I had 40-10 stuck in my brain. I was off by a touchdown.